Welcome back to your mat. Today I want to discuss wrist pain. So lots of people who are either brand new to yoga, maybe have a wrist injury, or maybe are building strength in their hands, may have wrist pain when they're doing things like downward facing dog, plank pose, or actually pretty much anything where your wrists are part of your foundation. So if you're fortunate enough to have blocks, these are a really great investment in your yoga practice. These ones are foam blocks and they tend to be a little bit more cost effective than say cork blocks. Cork blocks are a little bit heavier and they also cost more to ship if you're shipping them. But they're nice, both of them have great uses, both of them are great for practicing. I personally prefer a cork block just because it is a little heavier, it tends not to slide on the mat, and these tend to be a little bit more spongy, so if you're sitting on them or standing on them, they do have give, they do soften. But for our purposes today, we want them to be a little softer. So what I like to work on is if people have sore wrists or if you have sore wrists when you're practicing, little exercises or drills to help you strengthen your wrist. So first things first, we're going to come to kneeling. And if kneeling is uncomfortable, you also can do this little drill or setup from sitting. So what I'm going to ask you to do is make sure that your fingertips are spread out nice and wide. I call it Spider-Man hands, where all my fingertips are equally spread out and I'm pushing down through my thumb. So when I'm coming onto the floor, I'm going to start with up on fingertips and really pulling energy into the center of my hand. So it's almost as though I'm picking up a tissue off the floor, that kind of energy. So I'm going to push down into my fingertips and pull the fingertips into the center of my hand. And then I'm going to lean forward and hug these forearms together. So not only am I strengthening my joints, the muscles and tendons in my fingers, but I'm also keeping my wrist nice and long so that I don't collapse into the wrist. So if you're pushing down into the fingers and pulling up, and you don't have to do this, I just want to show you, look at how much weight you can put into your fingertips, right? You can even push back to down dog. I even see people do all kinds of interesting things on their fingertips. Because if you're really pulling energy into the center of your hand, you don't need to dump energy or weight into your wrist. So that's the first part you want to do in setting up your hands for any poses where being on your hands is foundational. So now bringing our knuckles down to the mat and really keeping our palms lifted. And we can also press a lot of weight, not only into the finger pads, but also into the wrist. So I'm going to show you how much weight you can also put into your, I should say knuckles, not wrists. And then when you're ready, we'll bring the whole palm of the hand to the floor, but really think about clawing the floor. Think about a kitten's walking up a curtain, that whole clawing effect. I call this panther paw. So pressing down into the pads of the fingers, rooting down into the knuckles, and now hugging the arms in toward each other. I can lift my legs and look back and have little or no weight dumping into my wrists. So if that works for you, those are great hand movements for anything like chaturanga, where we're hugging in, okay, downward facing dog, and eventually, if you're kicking up into anything like handstand, you want to have that engagement. You really want to make sure that you're pushing down through the L of your hand, so through this primary first knuckle and really pressing down through the thumb. You can even bend the thumb and press it into the mat to give you just a little bit more stability, because this part of your hand is a lot stronger than this part of your hand and can help with weight. If none of these work, maybe you have arthritis in your wrist or an injury, I love blocks. So I'm going to use 2 blocks here. This is a great little tip that I learned from my friend and fellow yoga teacher, Kat. And so having blocks underneath your forearms can help with things like down dog. And the reason I'm choosing 2 blocks is when I line up my hand next to the blocks, it comes up basically to my elbow. It's just a little bit below my elbow. So I'm replacing this part of the height of my arm so I don't feel quite so compressed. Because often when we give the cue of dolphin pose, or if you hear the cue of dolphin pose, people will say, or teachers will say things like, if down dog feels really tough or strained, you can come into dolphin pose, okay? And for me, dolphin pose feels a lot harder than downward facing dog because I'm closer to the floor and I feel compressed. I feel like my weight is shifting forward into my head, and that can be uncomfortable if you have things like blood pressure issues or you find you get pressure behind your eyes.
because this is very compressed. Also, if you have abundance in the center of your body here, this can also feel really compressed and a lot of weight pushing forward. So if you have two sets of blocks underneath your forearms, that gives you back the height you've lost by going down onto your forearms. So coming onto your forearms, onto the blocks, and then you can see you get a lot more height. And you can really work with where you want to be with your legs. And it also gives you an opportunity just to play. Sometimes what I like to do is bring the blocks a little bit closer. I'm a big fan of lacing my hands together. Gives me a little bit more leverage, and then you can play with all kinds of ways of moving your feet around. You can even come into plank here if you like. And in that way, if you have sore wrists, you can really work on shoulders and protect your wrists. Another way you can wrap your fingertips around the block is in my favorite, in chaturanga, in cobra, things like that. So when we're in these kinds of poses like chaturanga, often we're pushing a lot of weight into our wrist, or the joint at our wrist comes past 90 degrees, which can be painful for some of us. If you have flexible wrists, this might not be an issue. So sometimes you can just use blocks. And what I like about using blocks is I wrap my hand around the width of the block, and it really encourages me to engage my fingers, which is what we were doing when we were up on our fingertips. It's just really engaging our fingers and our hands, which I really appreciate. And so here, I feel a lot less pressure in my wrist because the angle of my wrist is different. And from here, you can also lengthen out your arms and down dog. And for those of us who have abundance in the center of our bodies, it may be easier to walk your feet forward if your arms are longer. It's also nicer because you can use the blocks to bring the floor to you when you're coming into things like forward fold. Often in class, I will see people kind of dangling here because they really can't reach the floor. And what the two things I always say is take your feet out wider, bend your knees more. So come more into a squat and fold. That's less pulling on the hamstrings and less pulling on the low back. And then you can draw the floor up to you by bringing blocks underneath your hands. You're going to push down through your feet, push wide just to give yourself some stability, and use your blocks here. I really enjoy doing a practice with the block, and we'll do a short one here so you can kind of see how to maneuver the blocks when you are working through vinyasa. So we'll just do a standard sun salute here. So let's start in mountain pose. Feet about 2 fist width apart. Root down through the feet, push wide, firm the center of your body, shoulder blades onto your back. Inhale, reach the arms high to the sky. Exhale, watch me bend at the knees, lift the sitting bones back, so press back through the bottom so that you're actually folding forward. When you push the bottom back, it's easier to bring the torso forward. If you find that you're compressed in the center of your body, you can take your feet out wider, or you can also place your hands on your belly and tuck the belly flesh in as you fold forward. Inhale, half lift. Exhale, fold. I'm going to bring my blocks to a slightly higher setting and step back into lunge pose. I'm going to take lunge 1, so hands can be on the blocks, hands can come on the knees, hands can come to the sky. It's really up to you. Taking a nice deep breath here, I'm bringing my hands back to my blocks for me. Breathe, and now take your blocks to their lowest setting, pushing into your hand, pushing off with your toes. Let's come back to a down dog. Good. Inhaling deeply, exhaling completely. Inhale forward to top of a push-up, and then lower down knees, chest, chin all the way down. Now my blocks are really close to my body, so I'm going to bring my hands out, rest my shoulders, tops of my shoulders on my block, then curl my shoulders back, lift up, cobra pose. Then lower down, pressing into my hands, pressing it up into tabletop position, and back to downward facing dog. And what's really nice about the blocks here is I've created a little bit more space for myself and my body. So now you can lift your left leg high to the sky, you can shift your shoulders forward and step your left foot wide or behind the block. So that might give you a little bit more leverage. Then you can line your blocks up on either side of your foot and then either stay hands on the block, hands on the knee, hands on the waist, and come up. Okay. Let's try it on the other side. Taking your blocks either back to their lowest setting or staying where you are, pushing off with your hands, stepping back to down dog. So we'll try the second side now. Left leg or right leg high to the sky. You can bend the knees, stack the hip. Remember, shift the hips forward like you're coming into plank when you step. And then step your foot either behind the block or wide of the block. Okay? Then take your blocks, line them up around your left or right leg, and then inhale. Whoop, you can either come up, if you've got the balance, and that was tricky, and you notice I use the wall to come up, hands on the knee or on the waist, or keep hands on your blocks. And now pushing into your blocks, and I like to rock a little bit when I push off, pushing through my block, stepping forward, forward fold. And again, if you're feeling compressed in the center of your body, take your feet out wider, fold your belly in, and see if you can come a little bit closer. Inhale all the way up. Exhale, hands to heart center. And when I'm folding my belly, I'm just gently placing my hands on the flesh of my belly and pulling it back toward my hip points as I fold over. Once my hands and my thighs meet, I allow the thighs to hold the belly as I fold forward. Good. Inhale, half lift. And from here, you can sit back into your heels, lift your heart, come into a chair pose. Good. Inhale, reach all the way up. Exhale, hands to heart center. And so that's the way that I like to use blocks to navigate around the mat. There's all kinds of fun ways that you can play with blocks once you get more comfortable with them. From lunge pose, you can walk into wide-legged forward fold. You can move into extended side angle. There's all kinds of fun things you can do. And what's fun with the lighter blocks is they're quite easy to move around through your practice. When you're practicing, I also like to use them when I'm doing a seated squat pose, bringing the floor a little bit closer, all kinds of fun things. And the light ones are great for moving. They even work well if you're coming into a sun salute and you want to lift them up. They're a little bit more manageable, say a cork block, which is a little bit more heavy. So you can really play with all kinds of ways to play with the blocks. You just got to get creative. So this is one of my favorite props, the block in the wall, and these travel really well because these ones are light. So I would encourage you to invest in a set of blocks and to really play with your practice. I want to just say there's no right or wrong way to do asana. It's what really works well in your body. There are some contraindications, like you don't want to load a joint that's not secure. You don't want to take your knees past your toes. Those are universal types of alignment cues that keep your body safe. But there's nothing to say that you can't play around with the asana in ways that make your body feel great. And so remember, you are making the yoga fit your body. You're not trying to make your body fit the yoga. All right, thanks very much for being here. It's been really fun. Let me know if you have any questions. I would love to see what you do with your blocks, so feel free to post a picture of yourself doing interesting things in your asana practice with your blocks. Make sure you tag me at Dianne Bondi Yoga. And thank you very much for being here. I'll see you next time on your mat. If you're here with me on YouTube, thanks so much for joining me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and comment on the bottom below. How do you like to use your blocks in your practice? Don't forget to click that notification button so you know you'll be the first to know when I post a new video. Thank you so much for being here. Namaste.